everybody. So today I'm going to do a brief review of some kids' books I've read. Most of these would be considered middle grade, although a couple might be considered early chapter books for a little bit younger kids. But recently I've been working on a new book of my own that is geared for middle grade readers. It's going to be a collection of short stories and poetry that's either funny or creepy or kind of weird. And so while I've been working on that, I've been reading a lot of kids fiction because I tend to do that. Like whatever I'm writing at the moment, I often tend to read a lot of that kind of literature. So I'll go ahead and I'll just do a brief review of each of the kids' books I've read recently. And the first one is The Green-Eyed Monster, which is a poison apple book, and it's by Lisa Fiedler. And it was a really good book. The poison apple books I really like. They have poison apple books, which are kind of like supernatural, almost Goosebumps like books, but they're geared more for girls than Goosebumps is. And Rotten Apple is, I think it's mostly like about zombies, but it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of that creepy, weird Goosebumps type stuff, but it's geared more for girls. So I really like both of these series of books, and they seem to be fairly popular, although I'm not sure that they're hugely popular because they don't put out a ton of these, and a lot of them, unfortunately, you can only get at like book fairs and things like that, so it can be hard to find some of them in stores. And this one I actually found at a discount bookstore. But this story, it's just a fun story about a girl who meets a new friend, and her friend has some serious jealousy issues. And I mean, there's a whole supernatural component to why her friend is being so jealous and mean to everybody. And it's just a fun read. I mean, it's definitely not something that's gonna like, change your worldview or anything, but it's a good book. It's just a fun read. And then along the same lines of kind of like creepy middle grade books is The Midnight Library. And this is by Damien Graves, and this is the Voices collection. And each collection in the Midnight Library series has 3 different stories. And the reason I got this one was because I thought the first story about a girl who hears voices in her heads that tell about the future, I thought that sounded kind of like an interesting thought for a story. And so I got this book, and that one was pretty good. I liked that story. And then the second story, which is about a kid whose running shoes like take on a life of their own and are evil, that was a kind of an amusing, funny story. And then the last one is about a kid who wants to get an apple from the neighbor's orchard, but the neighbor's really creepy and has some weird supernatural stuff going on there. So without ruining it, they're all creepy, kind of funny stories. And just like Goosebumps, they have, a little kind of a twist ending often. So they're good books. I think this is the second Midnight Library book I've read. And again, I picked this up at like a used bookstore. So I really enjoy these. I'm definitely going to look for more in this series because I really like spooky, creepy, funny kind of stories, especially like, for middle graders and that kind of stuff. And then the next book, which this book is actually more of a chapter book for younger readers than it is for middle grade readers. Although I think a lot of kids in middle grade reading would still like this book because it's funny, and it's kind of like the whole Diary of a Wimpy Kid stuff. It's got lots of doodles to go along with it, and the kid in it is pretty funny. I mean, it is a little bit of a younger age group geared for than the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but it's still funny enough. I think even kids in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, some of them would really enjoy it. And when I was looking through it, because I often do that when I'm deciding whether to try a new series, I look through it and read little bits to see what I think about it. And when I read this part here, which is talking about looking up stuff about the presidents on the computer for President's Day, and then it said, When we were done reading, Mrs. H told Wax and me to look up George Washington on the computer. President's Day was next week. All the presidents have the same birthday, so kids get a day off from school. And I like that kind of, funny humor that I'm not even sure kids would get necessarily the joke about the presidents all having the same birthday. So sometimes when I read kids' books, I pick up on things that I think are actually probably put in there more for adults to find funny, or I think a lot of sometimes the humor probably goes over the kids' heads, but it's kind of fun to see little things like that. And it's just an amusing, funny little book. And I like books that have cartoons to go along with them because I definitely like a visual appeal to go with something. So it's a fun little series if you have kids, around the ages of 6 to 10 or so. This is definitely a good series to get them to give a try. And it's a really good series for reluctant boy readers. And then the next book is The Great Gilly Hopkins by Katherine Paterson. And this was actually a Newbery Honor book. And Katherine Paterson wrote Bridge to Terabithia, which is one of my favorite middle grade books, actually. It's kind of in the back here, it shows some of the books that she's written. She's written The Same Stuff as Stars, Bridge to Terabithia, Preacher's Boy. So she's written a lot of different kinds of stuff. And she wrote Jacob Have I Loved, which she also won a Newbery Medal for. But The Great Gilly Hopkins, I picked this up because I saw that it was about a foster kid. And it's kind of a story about a foster kid who is too rough for anybody to handle. And so she's kind of, been thrown out of foster homes and she doesn't trust anybody. And as a former foster parent, I could really relate to that because, I saw lots of kids like that who had been thrown around so much and had learned not to trust anybody. And, unfortunately, our foster care system often hurts kids as much as it helps them, I think. And this is just a really good book for kids who, either if you know a kid who is a foster kid, I think they definitely relate to this. And if you know any kids who know foster kids, maybe reading a book like this would help them kind of to understand a little better why foster kids sometimes may react the way they do or feel the way they do about things. And it also is just a good, book for anybody who wants to know more about how it really can feel to be a fostered kid and, be thrown around and not feel like you're really wanted and that kind of stuff. So it's a serious book, but it's a heartwarming kind of book too. And of course, it has a happy ending. Well, kind of happy. I don't want to ruin it, but actually it didn't have the ending I really would have liked to have had. I honestly thought it would end differently, but maybe in the end it's still kind of a happy ending. I guess I'll let you guys, if you read it, come to your own conclusion about that. But honestly, it didn't quite end the way I had hoped. But it was a really good book, and I would recommend it for adults or kids. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is by Jane Yolen, who is a really, really great children's author. She's written a lot of great books. And this is called Centaur Rising. And it's, as you can guess from the title, it's a fantasy. And it's about a little girl and her family who find a centaur. Well, they don't really find him. He's born to one of their horses on their farm. And so, out of the blue, suddenly they have this mythological fantasy being that they're in charge of, taking care of and providing for. And most of the book is about, how they deal with having, a fantasy creature and, trying to hide it from people. And then when they can't hide it from people, trying to deal with, the attention you get when it's comes out in the news, that you have something like that going on. So it's an interesting book. And then there's also kind of like a side plot, which is about her little brother who has a special kind of medical condition, which I was trying to remember what medical condition he had. But let's see, the thalidomide babies syndrome, which were often called seal children, which were born in the 1950s and 60s a lot. And what the condition is that mothers were given certain medicines for like nausea and things like that when they were pregnant. And unfortunately, those medicines caused a lot of birth defects that were really, really severe. And they didn't know that until it was too late, and a lot of children had been born with these problems. So, I mean, that's really an interesting side element, and it's definitely something that, you know, can teach kids empathy and kind of help them see some things that, you know, disabled kids go through. And it also kind of goes a little bit into equine therapy, you know, like using horses to as a sort of therapy for kids with disabilities. So it's kind of like, it's got a lot of stuff going on, but it's a very good book. And it's a very fast read. I felt like I went through it pretty quickly. And it's really kind of heartrending at times, and it really pulls at your heartstrings. And I think kids, they'll love the fantasy elements of it, but I think they'll also really come to care about the characters. And I think that's what makes any book good, is when you really come to care about the characters. So that's my recent collection of kids' books I have read. And if you guys have read any of these books, or if you have anything to share about any of these books, feel free to comment and let me know whatever you want to say. And if you've read any really good kids books lately that you think I should check out and consider doing on a future video, let me know. I'll be more than happy to check them out. I'm always looking for good books to read and review and stuff like that. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I guess I'll see y'all later, so bye!